Hello to everybody here and everyone at home. You may be at a point in your life where you are saying to yourself, I love it. You're reading the Bible like this woman here, and you're just thinking, I love it. But then you might stumble upon a few things in the scriptures or in life, and you might be feeling like, actually, no. Deep down, if you scrape it all away, there are some doubts that I have. So tonight is episode number 2 of I Doubt It, and today we're going to get into the concept of making sense. Whether you like it or not, your brain is trying to make sense of things. So last week, or the last session, we had an introduction. We discussed the 4 stages of faith. You said, this is too fast. I say, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of content that I'm going to cover, and there's going to be a lot tonight. So we are making videos of all this. I can apologize that it's too fast, but please go back, look at the slides, look at the video, and hopefully, it'll make a little bit more sense. So thirdly, there we go. Apologetics. This is not an apologetics class. I just want to make that clear. If you don't know what apologetics is, don't worry about it. If you do know what apologetics is, that's not what this is. This goes beyond just apologetics, where we kind of tell you, here are all the things that people say against Christianity, and here's all the reasons why they're wrong. Okay? That's apologetics. We're going to go beyond that. Today, we're going to talk about the brain a little bit. We're going to talk about how expectations can get missed and how that causes us pain. We're going to talk about the story, Bible examples from scriptures, the problem with harmonizing the Bible at times. Then we're going to do a Q&A. And we're going to have more follow-up episodes. I'm going to talk with Steve to exactly figure out what Sundays, but the rhythm that we're looking at right now is every other Sunday after church, probably in the garden room, that sort of a thing, every other week. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We don't have definite dates yet, but we need to set those up. Okay. So the title of this lesson is Making Sense of It All. Okay? So trying to figure out how life works for me or doesn't work for me. So making sense of the world. So we're going to talk about the brain a little bit. This author says, oddly enough, your ability to perceive actually, or crucially, depends on all that you don't perceive. Thanks to our limited senses and distorted brain maps, you can experience and interact with your world, and you can do it all with a brain that's smaller than a bread box. Okay? So the idea here, we're going to look at four aspects with the 4 colors. The idea is that there's a lot going on. There's millions and billions of things happening, and they're all clamoring for your attention, some by accident and some on purpose. It's called marketing. Okay? So, first thing here is efficiency. Your brain needs to be efficient. Why? Because it takes a lot of energy to run your brain. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, running your brain is takes more energy than any other organ in your body. Okay? So, efficiency, your ability to perceive is limited by your need to have a small, energy-efficient brain. So, we have a small brain, but we have a big brain too. Okay? But it needs to be efficient. Secondly, perception. You miss more than you think, okay? So I realized this when I watch sports with my kids, and those of you who've ever watched sports with Timmy, my son, who's at home sick right now, when you watch sports with him, and I'm looking at the quarterback, drops back, throws the ball, and maybe it's caught or it's missed. Tim will say, oh my gosh, the tight end didn't run his route properly, and so the safety came up too quick. And I'm like, what? And we have to roll it back, and he's right. And I didn't even tight end, running back. I was just thinking, Tom Brady's, and this is what it is. And Gronk maybe or whoever's going to get the ball. But I miss more than I actually get. Perception. You can perceive only a fraction of the information buzzing around you. Number 3, maps. Perception is made possible by maps. So what scientists have discovered is we have these maps in our brain, and we organize our concepts, and we organize the inputs, and we are ready to quickly respond and to understand what's going on. And all the stuff that's not important, you forgot the guy's name because you were so busy with everything else, you didn't think it was important. It didn't go into that map, but maybe it is important. All right, next person, or next idea here. So the map creation, thanks to your brain creating a bunch of maps, it can house 5 senses rather than just 1 or 2. So all while keeping your hat size small and your appetites manageable. All right, distorted maps. So not only do you create maps, your maps are a mess. Okay, so you may think, I'm really good at perceiving. And you may be one of those people who goes, oh, I really get people. Oh, I understand people. Oh, I get things really quickly in school too. I'm very intuitive. And maybe you are in certain areas, but you also have distorted maps. Your brain maps are warped, preserving some detail while sacrificing others. And that's the interesting thing, because we have here Mark's brain. He's going to hear this lesson, and he's going to think, oh gosh, that whole thing about the maps in the brain, that's fantastic. And he's going to forget all the other stuff we talked about. Chuka, on the other hand, is going, everything makes sense except the maps. I don't understand that. And so we have all these, everything we're perceiving is going through your filter. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. So what we expect when we follow Jesus. You become a disciple, and you are now drinking from a fire hydrant, okay? You're trying to make sense of all this information. So you thinking, all right, I'm going to be a good person. And when I'm a good person, that'll lead to me being happy. I'm going to be full of integrity. And when I'm full of integrity, that's going to lead to blessings. I'm going to lead a life of quality. I'm going to do things that are right and do it right the first time. And that's going to lead to success in life. I'm going to be living out my discipleship. And that's going to become maturity for me. I'm going to read the Bible, and you know what that's going to bring me? Answers. I'm going to understand it all. And we have these expectations. Our experience sometimes isn't quite a match to our expectations, all right? And this happens, I'll just say, you get married. That's especially when it happens. Because you're thinking, she's perfect. I'm not bad. We got God. We got people. We got counselors. We got the Bible. How can there be problems? And then life hits. And there are, because it's two people who think differently and have different maps in their minds. So our experience is, I'm going to be loving. And you know what that leads to sometimes? Suffering. I don't like the suffering part. Marriage, it's going to be awesome. Oh, there's problems. Not my marriage. Everybody else's marriage. Now, there are a couple of people out there who have an Enneagram 9, marries an Enneagram 9, and they're all happy. Good for you. Dave and Cece Bruce are 9s, and I envy them. They're both just happy, loving, get along. You want to go to the movies? Whatever you want to do. I'm fine. We're all just going to do the loving thing. Parenting. I love my children. They're so awesome. If I could just control them. Faithful friends who sometimes leave God. And that messes you up. There's a lot of pain when you lose a relationship. The Bible, full of answers, but also sometimes it's not so clear. And I've just started finding some things that are not so clear. What do I do? So sometimes we are simply unable to handle the tension caused by incongruent information, and we feel the need to hastily escape that discomfort. Incongruent information. And you can look at who said that quote. That was Juan Weisman. You can laugh later. Storyality. Your reality is determined by how you frame and you create the stories as they come into your brain from all the details of information that clamors for your attention. Okay? So we're going to look at a couple of ideas here. There's a gentleman named Kendall Haven. This guy is fascinating. You can listen to some of his YouTube videos. He's like the master guru on the topic of storytelling and how story works. What you're trying to do is you're having a story in your mind. You're watching a movie. That's why when people interrupt you, it can be a little bit of a problem. You're in the middle of your little story. You're in your little world. And here comes somebody else from the outside. So Kendall Haven has some pretty interesting things to say about storytelling, and go watch him on YouTube. It's some pretty cool stuff. So the first idea here is we absorb information. That means information's coming into my brain. It's just data. It's just information. Then we have this make sense mandate. So what make sense mandate is where we bring it into our filters. And you have a filter. You may not understand it. You may not like the fact. You may not even want to admit that you are biased, but you are. You're going to see things very differently. Other people. Then it goes into your subconscious mind where your filter takes action. Okay? So one picture filtered, the other picture not filtered. And then it can get even worse. We really can get distorted. And if you look at this woman, she's beautiful. Her eyebrows are beautiful. But are they really her eyebrows? If you look real close. So we do that in our minds. We have these filters. We see things we want to see. When you're in love, you are not going to see that the person that you're in love with may have bad breath. That's fine. You may not care about that. They may be fiery and a little bit aggressive at times. You're just going, I like that personality. I like that salsa. Right? But later on, after 20 years of it, you may want her to just come down a little bit. Right? So, and then you only see the hot, mean salsa, the mean green salsa. And you're not seeing all the awesome salsa because we have filters and what we have, and they're called automatic thoughts. So, storyality. They said I'd look hotter if I took pictures with a filter. This gentleman is holding a filter. He looks pretty hot, I must say. All right, so story influence theory. So Kendall Haven talks a little bit more about this. First, we engage. Stories engage us emotionally. So think about the best storyteller in the world. Who was it? Jesus. His stories are so memorable. His stories are, you can learn them quickly, you can pass them along quickly, and they are not just clear, answerable items. They're things you got to discuss. They will disrupt your world. These parables. They're not friendly little stories about heaven. They're some pretty doggone, challenging stuff, and it doesn't always make sense. So stories engage us emotionally. Information is not enough. Stories allow the information to flow into our brains, okay? Transport. Good stories transport us into the story itself. Isn't that what the parable of the sower? You can kind of imagine a gentleman or a guy walking down the path, and you can see him grabbing in and throwing the seed, and some of it falls right on that path because it's coming right through his fingertips, and some of it's going to scatter here and there, and you get it. Jesus transports you, and your empathy connects with the story. Your trust is invoked. Relevance. Good stories are relevant. If you don't perceive relevance, then you will give yourself permission to ignore the information. This is really important. If it's not relevant, you will check out. We're going to look at a few photos a little bit later on of people who have checked out. Sometimes you check out. Sometimes you're in a conversation and you're like, this is so boring. Let's talk about anything interesting. This is I can't take this anymore. Let's talk about sports or movies or anything, but I don't want to talk about GDP of Nigeria anymore. I just can't. Influence. Good stories result in influence, which means they change attitudes, beliefs, values, knowledge, and behavior. And the two keys here are engagement and influence. So if you want to have influence, you need to engage people. Jesus did that. If you want to be influenced, you need to be engaged. And if you are going through deconstruction, you may be disengaging. We're going to look at that a little bit more. So what we have here is we have a gateway. Engagement is the gateway to influence. Okay? So if you're disengaging, watch out. That's what marriage therapists also say. If you're still fighting with your spouse and you care enough to discuss. But if you don't care anymore, forget it. Marriage is over. Your chance is very low of anything happening in a relationship if you just don't care anymore. You just don't care. Engagement is the gateway to influence. If you do not engage, you will not be influenced. As a storyteller, if you cannot get people to engage with your story, you will not be able to influence them. Okay? So, let's take a look at the next idea here. Disengage. What does it look like? So you've got unplugging, disengage. You may just be hanging up the phone, or you may be like Oprah or Hermione. You know? Yes, good job. I'm impressed. Thank you. But you're not moved. Or you might even be like the guy from, what show is this? Parks and Rec. I don't care. I just don't even care anymore. You're not even bored and like Oprah trying to like pay attention. You just don't care. We don't want to get there, guys. We don't want to get there, and we don't want people around us to disengage like that. So, one person says, well, deconstruction is not that big of a deal. It's probably just a phase. You know, those folks have good hearts. They're going to outgrow it. They'll deal with it. They're good-hearted. And someone else may come back and say, well, I get it. But if we ignore the issue, then people will eventually just disengage. And when folks disengage, they eventually move on to something else, maybe something more interesting. So let's help people not just stay engaged, but let's engage them even more with their minds, their hearts, their talents, and their passions. Engagement is crucial to the story that you're telling yourself as information from God, from the Bible, is coming in. But they're disciples. They promise to stay committed. It's their responsibility to follow through, and I'm going to hold them to it. Accountability. You promised, God. You got a point there. But instead of just expecting people to stay committed, I think we should provide whatever help we can offer to, first of all, understand where people are coming from, and secondly, walk them through a process of making sense of the information that they find perplexing. So if you're perplexed, let's get you in a process to deal with those issues. Don't remain there, because over time, you will disengage. And that's the beginning of trouble. So, storyality. Humility requires me to recognize that I am not objective. Okay? Each of us hears a different story. You may not think that, but everyone in this room is responding a little bit differently to the things that we're looking at here. You're all being triggered a little bit differently. Maybe one of you had a professor that was all into story, and the professor was boring as all get out. In your mind, you're like, oh gosh, we got to talk about storytelling. Oh no. Other people may be excited. Everybody's got a different angle. Each of us visualizes a different scene when we hear a story. We'll look at an example here in a second. Each of us brings with us a library or a map of cultural assumptions. So there's a lot of cultures in this room. And it's not just races, cultures. And then there's cultures within all the races. And then there's the age groups, because a white person isn't a white person. You got a Mark Shump, and then you got someone old. Each of us is biased, and we're going to have a whole lesson about our biases and synonyms for bias. So here we go. Predisposed. I'm predisposed to this. Well, I think you're distorted. Well, your angle's a little bit skewed. Well, you have a partial understanding. I think you're just twisted. You're warped. Well, that's a decent angle on things. You're kind of slanted this way or that way. You're a bit subjective. I think you're just partisan. You're one-sided. You're influenced. Okay? So we've got all these things going on, and we've got in the background our parents, our friends. What are they going to think? What are our professors going to think? What are our colleagues going to think? We got all this stuff floating, our spouse, all this stuff floating around in the background. So here's an example. Where's John? Simple question. The answer is, well, I didn't want to say anything, but I saw a green Tesla parked out in front of Angela's. So you're telling yourself a story right now. And you're going, why in the world is Angela cheating and seducing John? What's going on here? Well, actually, her answer has nothing to do with the question. It's just two statements that may have nothing to do with each other. But we create a story out of this answer, and we have we got a soap opera ready to go. We're ready to send it to, Amazon Prime to turn into a TV series. Another example, the nativity scene, all right? Getting into the Bible now. The nativity scene tries to tie all the elements of the birth of Christ into one picture. Christmas carols don't help a lot with this, by the way, either. And because of this, we end up subconsciously bringing incorrect beliefs into our understanding of history. We're thinking, I know the story. Well, let's talk about it. Oh, here we go. I did have something small, but this time I don't need Rick Meckhamson. Woohoo! Got my own Rick Meckhamson. When was Jesus born the night that Mary and Joseph arrived in Bethlehem? Well, according to the nativity, it's pretty clear. According to the Bible, maybe not. The donkey. Did Mary travel to Bethlehem on a donkey? Well, of course, if you've ever seen any of the movies, of course she did. The inn. Was there really an inn that turned them away because they didn't have any available room? Of course there was an inn. And the innkeeper, and he was trying to be nice and, gave him at least something. The angels singing. Did angels really sing to the shepherds the night Jesus was born? Of course they did. I think. It's in there somewhere. Stable. Was Jesus born in a stable filled with various types of livestock? Of course he was, according to the nativity scene. Wise men. Did the 3 wise men come to worship the evening Jesus was born? There's a whole lot wrong with that sentence. If you just read that sentence and you know what you're doing, it's just the whole sentence is messed up. Camels. Did the 3 wise men arrive on camels? Again, a messed up question. That's just you don't even ask that question. It's not a yes or a no question. It's just the wrong question to ask because there wasn't 3 of them. Fellowship. How great was the fellowship between the shepherds and the 3 wise men? Boy, did they get along, hugging and just, bro, how's it going? How's it going with those sheep? And well, it's going great with the sheep, but let me tell you, I'm looking at the stars here. Tell me what I can learn about the stars and what my sheep can learn. They never met. We got 2 different stories, 2 different perspectives, and we try to make it into this thing, and we're going to get into later the problem with harmonizing. Another example, who was present when Jesus healed Legion? Just give me a number. Are we talking 10 to 15 people? 15 to 20 people? 20 to 30 people? Any guesses out there? How many people you think were involved, were there? So let's count them up. You got Jesus, all right? There's 1. You got the 12 apostles. Oh, plus, we forgot, Matthias was there. Right? Remember Matthias? They wanted to get he was the replacement apostle for Judas, and so Matthias was there, and maybe Justus was there as well, and maybe a few others. Those are the 2 that they rolled the dice on, and they said, we got to replace Judas somehow. There was a larger group than just the 12. There was these other guys hanging out who could become, they're like, what were you? You were a jurist in waiting, or you're an alternate. Yes, these are alternate apostles. So they're on the top 5 list here. So we got 12 of those, plus some more. We got Legion. And according to Matthew, we got Legion number 2. So we got a second Legion. So we're up to 12 plus at least 3 or 4 or 5. So we're up to 20. And oh yeah, there's got to be 7 to 12 women. So Luke 8, 1 through 3 says there was 3 women plus, and it uses the word many other women who traveled with Jesus. So we're looking at least 30 people here who were hanging out, and our brains, our story, we're thinking there was a boat with 13 people on it, and they arrived. And that's the story that we're so confident about. And yet, maybe it's not quite the way we tell the story. Here's another interesting one. Unless you forgive other people, you will not be forgiven. Now, this sounds really clear. And then a friend of mine came to me and said, well, wait a second. Unless you forgive other people, That sounds to me like God is not willing to put into practice what he's expecting from us. He wants us to forgive other people, but he said, no, I'm not going to forgive you unless you meet a condition. Ooh. My friend told me this, and I said, oh gosh, let me pray. I don't know. He's sitting in the room. So I was like, what are you going to do with that? That's a good point. And then I heard a sermon just several months ago talking about forgiveness is what you experience. You're only going to extend forgiveness if you experience forgiveness. And we'll look at a whole story on this. So when you experience it, it changes you. And then if you're not willing to pass it on, you haven't experienced it yet. You got to go back and get into what does it mean to experience forgiveness? Do I even care about the topic? Or is it just one of those holy things that we do when we go to church, we're forgiven? Or does it move me and change me? Am I in touch with that I'm not an awesome person? I am a loved person. I have, I have royalty in my DNA. So, deconstruction. When someone can no longer make sense of her spiritual experience, she may enter into stage 3 perplexity. I thought we'd use some she in there somewhere, not just the he, okay? Thought some of you might like that. Some of you might be confused. Yes. If she sees no path forward, being able to eventually make sense of it, then she disengages. So you got perplexity leading to disengagement, and if she disengages, she will no longer desire to be influenced by that spiritual experience. It and its followers will no longer be considered relevant to her. So this is what happens. So in our church, where we're listening to people's problems, let's listen to a little bit what's going on a deeper level. Are we disengaging? Are we engaged? So this fellow says, I predict that over 90% of people under 30 in our family of churches and beyond, not just our family of churches, will eventually enter stage 3 perplexity due to A, unlimited access to information on the web. Hey Siri. B, the inability to make sense of all that information along with their personal, spiritual, or church experience. It just doesn't match anymore for me. C, the inability to create a cohesive story. I'm trying to make a story out of this, and it's not working. And D, the general direction of society from the perspective of spiral dynamics, or to simplify it from the angle of the four stages of faith that we looked at. Fragments. What do you think this image is? See if you can figure it out. Anybody know what the image is? When you see the image, tell me what you think it is. What image is that one in the middle? Yeah. So now we see it. It's Bill Gates. And if I go back and I show it to you again, you'd be like, oh yeah, I can see the mouth, I can see the right eye. We see fragments, and it's difficult for us to make sense of things when we just see fragments. And what I want to tell you is a lot of the confusion you may be having is because you don't see all of truth. You see fragments, and then you see your distorted version. Not that you're worse than anybody, you just are a person, and you have a distorted version. Our efficient brains work overtime to fill in the gaps, to complete the pixelated puzzle as best we can. We must assume that although we have gained one new fragment, or a puzzle piece, there are hundreds of additional fragments out there that we will discover. Okay? So your picture is going to get clearer over time, and if you're struggling with, oh no, it doesn't make sense to me now, that's okay. Our constant access to new fragments will tempt us to jump to hasty conclusions, where you just say, I can't anymore. I just can't anymore. I'm done. Well, no, you're not. You're young. You got a long ways to go. So, words of wisdom here. Let me tell you a story of a man who had such a strong inner story that he skewed everything to match his inner story, his way of viewing the world, his lens. He held onto his internal filter so tightly that nothing could break through and change his story. Nothing could change it, including punishment, including prison, including truth, including kindness, including love, including forgiveness, including the biggest gift he could ever imagine in his lifetime, nothing was able to affect this man. This is the story of the unmerciful servant. That's in Matthew chapter 18. So it starts off, let's rob a bank. You commit a crime. Here we go. All right, he's got everything doing it. All right. From there, you're living the high life, George Costanza. I think the Greek word for unmerciful is Costanza. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Kenny can check on that. So you're living the high life after you've done this thing where you've stolen an unbelievable amount of money, which leads you to jail. So now you're in prison, you're rotting in prison, and yet you do have an advocate. And the advocate says, we all need mercy. And the judge is kind. And the judge says, you know what? I'm going to release you. And all that debt you have, it's gone. So what happens? You get about on the street and you see Steve Martin from an old movie. Is it?
It's not getting anything from the laptop. Oops, sorry.
Is anything coming through on this one either? Oh, nothing's coming through. We're going through the story here. I found GIFs or GIFs, depending on your... I know, that's the correct... I know, that's the correct...
Ooh, that is weird. The laptop's freaking out.
Okay,
Never seen that one before.
hold on.
Yeah, the laptop's like freaking out. That's really weird. Yeah, there's nothing. It's the laptop. The laptop is the problem.
Let me get my adapter then. That wouldn't be a worst case, right?
Oh yeah, I have one. Do you have one?
And we got here over an hour early to set all this up, and it was working awesome because these guys put in a lot of effort. I mean, a lot of effort. And they have all kinds of adapters. Is that working? Here, let me try to...
Yay! It's working.
It's working? Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Back to our usual programming. All right. So we have the story here. We got the guy steals the money. We got Costanza here living the high life. Costanza finally gets caught, goes to jail, but he has an advocate in Michael B. Jordan who says, you know what? Everybody needs mercy. He gets out of jail and he sees Steve Martin. Those of you over the age of 50 know what movie this is from. This was R-rated when I couldn't see it when I was a teenager, so actually I don't think I've ever seen the full movie, but it's The Jerk. So this is The Jerk, and it's the guy who's having a hard time, and he sees him, and you know what Costanza does? I remember you. You don't have any money, but you know what? You owe me money. And he says, can you please have mercy? And no mercy. I'm going to tie you up. I'm going to punish you. And God is making a point there. Let's see what the woman has to say about this. The wise woman. I picked an older woman here, a grandma wisdom. Well, it seems to me that even though he was forgiven, he never experienced that forgiveness, and therefore he was incapable of passing the kindness along. Even though he was released of his debt, he never felt released. He never experienced the freedom that comes with being released. So he never internalized the beauty and the value of what freedom and forgiveness can actually bring into your life. When it just goes into your head and doesn't reach your heart, the story you tell yourself is, somebody forgave me, whatever that means, and it doesn't go through my filters into my heart and make a difference and actually influence me. So, are there Bible inconsistencies? I would love to tell you that there are not, but there are. There are inconsistencies in the Bible, and you will find them sooner or later. And we could all just play the nice game and say, no, it's all just like a perfect package. But it's not a perfect package. So what do you do when you find some flaws? Now, the number 3%, I have no idea. I just kind of threw that out there. Just to be, I don't know what the number is. Could be higher, could be lower. So we have here normal Norman on the left, and he's led by fear. And we have historian Hermione on the right. And she's calm because she realizes, you know what? According to many historians, inconsistencies in the Bible are reasons to believe. It's actually good that there's some inconsistencies in the Bible. So let's look at the first one here. So we've got INRI. You know what INRI stands for? Jesus of Nazareth, Rex, King of the Jews. Okay? So if you look at all four Gospels, it's going to say something different. And the question is, which is right? What is the right version? Because they're all a little bit different. And I could say to you, it doesn't matter. They were all written to four different audiences. I don't know which one is the right one, but we do know there was a message, and it was there to shame him, and it was there to make the point that, yes, this man claims to be a king, but he's not. The fact that we have four different versions is actually good. That means it didn't all come from one source. That means there was four different brains involved. That's a good thing, that the four brains aren't just copying or Xeroxing what the other person said, which is what many think. They all copied off of Mark, but they didn't, and you can see that. Jesus' baptism. This is interesting. The perfect human being, the Son of God, God in the flesh, the Word, the everlasting Creator, humbles himself to get baptized by this weird guy in the desert? The weirdo. Submits to his authority. That story didn't make sense in their day, I'll just tell you. It didn't make sense. You're going to get baptized by him? I mean, Jesus, I don't know. I guess that's the legitimate way of saying Jesus in that case. Passion and swords. So there's a couple of stories where there are swords involved in the passion. Do you remember that? And he's like, I got 2 swords here, Jesus. That is enough. And you're like, whoa. 2 swords is enough. Why doesn't he just say don't have any of them? This would have never been written down by people if it didn't really happen, according to historians. And the reason is, why would you write something down that goes totally against your theology? They were pacifists, by the way, just so you know. First century disciples, all total pacifists, except for, I guess, Simon the Zealot. He was the exception. But swords, and Peter had a sword, and he cut the guy's head off. And Jesus, you could have stopped that. You could have, if you just would have told him, 0 is enough. Put him aside here. What are you doing with 2 swords anyway? But no. And then divorce. Paul talks about divorce. Jesus talks about divorce. And divorce, they talk about it a little bit differently. Sometimes they use similar language. Sometimes they use very different language. Sometimes they're referring to Genesis chapter 2. Sometimes they're not. And so what they say, you'd expect if it's a, fully perfect document that they all would have, agreed and all on one source. But no, it's different. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes Paul says one thing to the Corinthians and says something different to Timothy or to Colossians, and you're going, well, shouldn't he say the same thing all the time to all situations? I don't. Do you? Do you just have like a slab of things that you say, and you're going to pull out of your library of these 52 things that you've memorized, and you're always going to offer that? Okay, well, I think you need to read the Bible more. You've done that. Okay, how about you pray more? How many people did you share your faith? Try that, etc., etc. No, you don't live life like that. No one does. So there's eHarmony. We're all familiar with eHarmony. Now we're going to talk about B-harmony. All right? So B-harmony. What is the problem with B-harmony? That's Bible harmony. Generally, we believe that harmony is a good thing. And in music, harmony can be beautiful. Did you guys hear the harmonies on Sunday? I mean, Marley was amazing. On Sunday, I was just listening because I had to stay home, and I was able to hear all the harmonies, and it wasn't just the regular soprano voice, and it was a thing of beauty. Perfect balance is wonderful. This is not always a good thing when it comes to the Bible, though. If you're expecting it to just be this perfect thing that dropped out of heaven, when Joseph Smith wrote down his Mormon stuff, he wrote it down in King James. Interesting. He said these tablets came from God, and God speaks King James because that's all he knew. And we kind of go, we look at that and we go, all right, the Mormons are nuts. That doesn't make any sense. Come on, God doesn't speak King James. Gabriel didn't bring you a King James tablet of gold. Come on. Harmonization is not the goal. You may think it is. Things have to make sense. I'm saying it's best to understand each thing independently. So, my dad died when I was 15. Okay? Pretty young. That was over 40 years ago. I didn't have a dad growing up. Okay? And I didn't have a close relationship with him while he was around. Back in the day, you only had one therapist, and that was Dr. Spock, and not Dr. Spock from Star Trek. That was Dr. Spock who wrote books on, psychology, and he was the only one that wrote about child psychology. And dads today are like, oh, I want to be a really good dad. Let me see how I can improve in being a dad. Dads back in the day, not so much. So I have a few of my own memories of my dad. My older sister has shared with me some of her memories. Some were good. Some were not good. Some I'm like, gosh, Dad, seriously? I've spoken with his youngest brother. So his next youngest brother is now 96. So my dad would be 100 already if he were alive. And he told me stories. He's like, why'd your dad go out and get an ice cream cone and didn't bring one for you? I couldn't figure your dad out. I'm like, I didn't notice that. My older sister has told me stories. My mom has told me stories, and the two of them did not have a happy time. I did not grow up in a happy house. Grew up in a house full of fighting. If you think I'm combative, it's probably that. That's the culture I grew up in. My wife will attribute that. I met a friend of theirs many years ago who knew them both before they were married and after, when they were young marrieds. And she told me about their marriage, and I started having more empathy with him, right? So I grew up actually not liking my mom. And then I heard some of the things, and I was like, well, I heard some of these things, and I was like, gosh, my dad wasn't all he was cracked up to be either. And I'm piecing all these things together. They don't all make sense. Can I figure out my dad? I had a diary of his from 1957. I scoured it. This little book, 1957 to 1958. He wasn't as Christian as he claimed to be, I'll tell you that. His stories he wrote about the many girls that he would date simultaneously. And I'm like, whoa. And I didn't find this out till 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I'm reading through all of this, and it doesn't all make sense. I can just say my dad was a complicated guy. He was complex. He was way beyond a lot of his peers, but he was also messed up in a lot of ways. I would say he's a lot like me, a lot like you. In his time, he was doing his best. He was complicated. He was searching for God, and he searched in some places that I don't know if, I would, but maybe. He was trying. He was going beyond the borders. We try to harmonize the accounts of Jesus' birth. We have Matthew's story, probably written down from Mary. We have Luke's story based on his own research. When we attempt to harmonize, sometimes it can lead to more problems than it solves. There's two perspectives written to two different groups of people for two different purposes. I'm not saying it didn't take place. All I'm saying is these authors picked out things that fit into their story, that made sense for them as they were storytellers themselves, as they were trying to create a story to accomplish a purpose, which was faith in us. Luke writes that Jesus cleansed the temple directly before the crucifixion. You guys remember that? I think it's Luke 21. Right before the crucifixion, Jesus goes in, turns over the tables of the money changers, and yet John places this in chapter 2. I've always tried to harmonize this. And it's really hard to harmonize this. So were there two cleansings? Maybe. Why would Jesus cleanse the temple like early on, like right away? I don't know. What I do know is that John was into telling stories and into painting pictures and into, if you look at every story, there's a real drawn out story that he's telling in every single chapter. Did the authors use the same story for different purposes? To show Jesus, the Jews' motives, or to show Jesus' authority over the temple? Here's a statement. Read each author and each book independent of the others. In this way, each writing will contribute to the story you are creating about how God views and values you. And over time, this story will make more and more sense. Remember, you're growing as well. Your filters are getting better over time. You don't need to harmonize all the writings in order to create the harmony in your own story of the fact that God loves you. Your identity is in your being in the image of Christ. So, as we end this, when we do away with the need to harmonize everything in the Bible, we also do away with the so-called contradictions, thus allowing us to say with confidence, the Bible is perfect. There are no contradictions. The Bible is perfect. But is it historically, are all the things matching up? You're going to find problems there. That doesn't mean, though, in fact, you're going to find theologians that are going to say, in fact, that's not how God would communicate to us. He would give us something that makes us wonder and think and ponder the same way we do when we hear the parables. So, it's 8:35. Do we have time for a few questions? 9 minutes. We've covered a lot of material. All right, and I appreciate you guys paying attention. Are there any specific questions to the things we've talked about or anything else? Or are you disengaged? Okay, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark's always good for a question.
Amen. I think obviously incredible stuff that you're sharing. Very engaging as always. This is the gist Costanza. The big question that I have right now. So obviously, looking at these contradictions, there's an element where I think it's a good point that we have to look at them. They're different for different purposes. If we ask these authors, then they might be like, oh, maybe it was a little different. If they like, oh, when I recount it, whatever. And so there's a benefit to not trying to fit everything perfectly into this one perfect story. However, does that mean that we should avoid these contradictions and we shouldn't try to make sense? Because obviously it's Luke 19, I just looked it up, and then the John 2, they're at different times, like, and you can't put them together. But there's other ones like the demoniacs. There's one demoniac and two demoniacs, and you've come up with a logical conclusion. So when should we try and find a conclusion, and when should we just be like, you know what, there's different purposes?
You know, I think you're going to try to find a conclusion either way. That's. I mean, you've got a great brain, and you're going to try to make sense of it. Your brain will automatically try to make sense of it. What I'm telling you is that as your brain tries to make sense of things, you have a filter going on, and you are distorting the story a little bit based on maybe you grew up with a bad father or a great father. You grew up poor or you grew up wealthy. You've got filters. You were really hurt by someone you loved, or no, everything's just you've never been hurt before, actually. So based on all of these filters and all of these biases, give yourself a break and take the pressure off of forcing yourself to have a conclusion now. Because I think whatever you come up with, over time, your conclusions will be more and more mature over the years. But if you try to feel like, man, I can't anymore, this is just, it doesn't fit, it doesn't work for me, there's a lot of things. If that's how you treat your spouse, if that's how you treat your children, it just doesn't work for me. No, you actually need to adapt and change, and you do. You do adapt. You do change. There's plenty of hope. And that's kind of what I'm trying to embody here, is not just here are the answers, but you can be at this battle of the tensions going on. I've been at it for 40 years. I became a Christian when I was 15. So I've been at this for a long time, and I encounter things. I encounter things all the time, in fact, that make me wonder, that make me think. Most of them actually support my faith more, not less. And they make me go, wow, this is amazing. To me, for example, the whole story of the cross, no matter how you look at the story of the cross and of Jesus, no matter where you are, what stage of faith, no matter how harmonious you are, no matter how simple you are, and you don't have time for very much, the fact that God loves you and you have messed up and he's willing to forgive you and he's showing and he's proving it to you by letting his son get brutally tortured for you as evidence that he loves you. That story will trap your heart. It will compel you no matter where you are. And those are the kind of things that really stabilize my faith. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, how often are you going to be doing it here? Is this the last one here? Your class, by the way, was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to talk with Steve about exactly the Sunday plan. I know that we don't have the Veterans Auditorium every Sunday, so what we need to figure out is a plan between scheduling these and the Sundays that we are at the Vets, and then we're going to try and do it every other week. If it doesn't work out, then we may have to skip a week here or there to make it fit into the Veterans Auditorium schedule. But we're going to be doing classes, and they're all going to be. This was a lot of content tonight. They're all going to be kind of like this, maybe a little bit less content, but there's a lot of material, and it's all kind of like this to help you have grace with yourself, grace with other people, and understand there are solutions out there. You may not see them yet. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with us as a church. We're trying, and I think we'll be able to do more than just apologetics. We'll be able to help you, engage and stay engaged, and engage even more in your faith. So.
I'm sorry, so is it going to be on the website then? Because I already have somebody who wants to come.
Yeah, it'll be likely, we can possibly do it June 12th will be our first one, and then we have to look at the schedule because we're out of the vet. There's some reasons we're not in there.
Okay.
And then, like Mark said,
So June 12th, probably?
we have to confirm the garden room for that day because we're not even going to be in the auditorium. But we will have like two times a month, maybe sometimes you're right, we have to skip a couple weeks here and there. But we'll put a schedule together and we'll make it available online so people can register so they'll know when it is.
Yeah.
Who's coming.
And I think Steve said he's going to be cooking lunch for all of us. I thought I heard that. Something about lunch, something about food. I don't know, something along those lines.
Just a question on, I guess, on translation, as Bible is translated throughout different versions. Do you think that, I guess, translation loses the message?
Yeah, I got a whole class on that. And there's a lot of philosophies on how to translate properly, and there's no perfect way to do it. And you'd understand that do you speak any foreign languages? Paquito, okay. So you can't just translate certain things. I was talking to somebody on the phone today. Oh, not here, Kevin McDaniel out in Georgia. And I was telling him that, you know what, there's a whole group of people. The church split in Germany. The Lutherans split because you had the Geschneuzten and the Ungeschneuzten. The mustached and the non-mustached. There's so many phrases in German that I just can't translate into English. They're just there, and they're hard. Gemütlichkeit is really a difficult word. And in fact, in Danish, I think it's hygge, and people have just now started using the word hygge because you can't really translate, gemütlich. It's kind of cozy. So there's a lot of words. We say in English, just between the two of us. In German, you say under four eyes. And if somebody says to me 4 eyes, I'm thinking, I grew up with glasses, so I'm thinking 4 eyes is glasses. Under 4 eyes means just between the two of us. There's stuff you just can't So, and then if they're making a point, if Jesus is saying, there's 4 candles of holiness, and under 4 eyes, we will, so you're like, and if you translate that, literally, you're going to get the point that he's talking about 4 and 4. But if you translate it the way it probably should be translated, two people and 4 candles, you totally miss it. You don't even catch it. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on in the Greek and the Hebrew. So that's a difficult topic. Best thing is if you can just take a Hebrew class, you'll be great. Greek and Hebrew, Latin, you'll be just fantastic. I'd recommend that for everybody. Just, yes.
Yeah, so I find this kind of extremely interesting. I'm a Kingdom kid. So
Okay.
I grew up in an environment where my parents were the gateway to religion, to God, to Christianity. And now I moved out here by myself. I'm away from my parents for the first time in 25 years. And now I'm reconciling things that they taught me versus the Bible. And I'm having such a hard time understanding, is this really what I believe? Or was this instilled in me? And so many of my friends are no longer with God because that was their foundation, was their parents' faith.
Yeah.
What can you, I guess, suggest to someone like me, a Kingdom kid who wants to experience the Bible actually in my heart and not just my head? Because I feel like I've gone through all these stages, but like my heart
Wow.
has never been in it. So it's just such a complicated life where you grow up knowing everything already, but do you even believe it? Like, it's a hard
Wow.
existence. Like where do you think I should start, I guess?
Gosh, that's $1 million question. That's really a good question. I am not equipped to answer that one because I didn't grow up in the church. I was converted into the church when I was 15. A buddy of mine was invited at a Denny's. He was a host at Denny's. He was 16. He got invited. Bruce Evans, anybody here know Bruce Evans? Bruce Evans invited him and forced him to go to church because he did not want to go, and he kept trying to say no, but he's such a nice guy. Bruce talked him into it. He came to church, became a Christian, invited me a couple of months later. I became a Christian, and this is the same guy that got me into smoking and drinking and stuff, and also and other things, and also got me into church. So, I couldn't say no. Tim is a little bit better of a situation. He grew up in the church. It's a tough thing. That's why I am so glad we have taken the pressure off of Kingdom Kids, where we used to have this pressure that said, you know what, you're not baptized yet. You're already 16. I mean, everybody else is getting baptized. Well, now you're 17. In fact, you're in college and you're still not. I mean, are you spiritual? We don't do that anymore. Hallelujah, we don't do that. There is so much pressure because, honestly, you've got to sin. You've got to sin. I'm sorry, she's got to sin. And when you sin, you got to feel guilty. And you've got to feel like remorse. And you've got to feel like, this is not good. This is not how I want to live. This is not who I want to be. You've got to experience darkness, not a ton of it. I'm not saying go out and do the Amish thing, but I'm just saying, they just have this whole year of living it up, sowing their wild oats. I'm not saying that, but I mean, you do have to sin, and you do have to. And we as parents, I got 2 kids, and I'm like, my son's telling me stuff, and I'm like, he's got to repent of something, I guess. And I don't want him to sin. I don't want him to be hurt, but my kids don't always make great decisions. They make good decisions, sometimes better than me, sometimes worse than me. And, and I didn't, I wasn't making, I could tell you some things, that I wasn't making good decisions on. But only when you experience the darkness yourself, and then you experience that Jesus loves you. It's not about church. Right. I personally, when people get up and they share their conversion, this is just a pet peeve of mine, and all they do is talk about the church, I get concerned. It concerns me when someone's just sharing, gosh, I didn't have any friends, and then these people loved me so much. Never been loved like this before. I'm so glad to be baptized. I'm like, I didn't hear Jesus in there anywhere. And it's not that I'm looking for but I'm thinking, how deep is that? That faith, it will get plucked away very quickly. But if your faith is, God just thinks he loves me regardless of all the junk, and I do a lot of junk, and I make stupid decisions. And God still loves me, and he's on my side, and he's patient with me, and life's not just going to be black and white. Even when I get into the kingdom, I'm going to immediately go into the desert like Jesus, and it's going to be tough, and I'm going to mess up. Jesus didn't, but I will. And then you realize, so the church is just there to help you along your journey, but really the journey is you and Jesus. And if you just are in love and you're so thankful, and it's you and Jesus, that should handle it. Honestly, it's kind of that simple. That's maybe naive, but that's my perspective. That it's really, if I'm in love and impressed and, amazed by Jesus, that gets me pretty far. And that would be where I would start everything. We're good? All right. Thank you guys for your attention.